Hello, Anat, and welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Henry. Good morning. Thanks for having me.
That's all good. So I wanted to start this conversation around the time of lockdown during COVID. You told me about a story when we prepared for this of a young woman with cystic fibrosis and who's on the double transplant list for both lungs and also liver. While she was waiting for a donor, she had to fly to the US. And that was one of the first times where you saw this technology really go out and help someone. So, can you tell us about that story, how that all came about, and how Synchrony helped in that situation?
Yes, this was definitely, I would say, a unique and delicate time for everyone involved. These was, as mentioned, the early days of COVID. We just started, even we didn't even officially launch and get the company going, but we were initial phases of developing prototypes, brainstorming on some ideas, and very severe CF patients that was used to be treated daily by one of our co-founders, Gil Sokol, who is a trained respiratory therapist. He used to come into her house and treat her every single day with manual airway clearance therapy. She was at the time very severe in her condition with advanced cystic fibrosis, waiting for double organ transplantation. And as we are based in Israel, this is something that is not possible to do here. So she had to travel to the US to wait for a matching donor. And the main concern was with this very severe patient with the time of COVID, that was just she won't make it on the waiting period because no one knows how long it can take to find a matching donor for this delicate case. And unfortunately, other experiences for patients from the CF center here traveling to the US, they just didn't make it on the waiting period in the US. So they just didn't survive without their therapy. Without their therapy, and Gil being her therapist for years and really knowing, how she needs to be treated, and the entire care team at the center were really concerned about, can we send her overseas for who knows how long? And it was, again, the early days of prototyping our first version of the product. And we were able to get a device for her to take along with her. And she used it every single day. She was at this hotel room, um, just waiting for, good results for a matching donor. She used it every single day. During that time, she had fewer exacerbations, meaning worsening of her condition as she was waiting. And not only that, it kept her alive and stable. She was in a good enough position for the transplant to be successful. So the first step would be to find a donor, but in some cases, it doesn't even succeed. So the device enabled her to preserve her lung function and her clinical stability to be able to reach it with 6 months of for 6 months she was in the US without access to her respiratory therapist, just waiting for this transplant. She made it. The procedure was successful. She went through a long recovery period until she was able to come back here to Israel. And when she did that, she came back after a while, and we met her, and she kind of gave back the device because she didn't need it anymore. She had a new pair of lungs, a new liver. She was doing much better. She's a relatively young lady with a small child and just getting back to life, even getting up running. And we were all obviously very concerned by the time at the time when she was there waiting, and when she came back, we were like so relieved to think that the device really literally saved her life. And that was a moment that, personally we were all very proud of, but we also understood like the potential of having highly effective therapy and mimicking what an experienced respiratory therapist can do, uh, and automating that into a device patients can use daily, independently at home. That's really the motivation behind what we have been doing then and what we're doing ever since. And I would say this is kind of really, I'd say, reassuring and giving the team tons of motivation to bring LibAirty to market, which is where we are today.
That's awesome. So let's dive into what the actual kind of condition is. Like, what's actually happening in the lungs that would mean you require a respiratory therapist? So there's obviously a couple of um, couple of conditions where you do need a respiratory therapist, COPD and brachystasis, I think it's called. So those conditions, what's actually happening in the lungs that requires, what's happening in the lungs in those conditions?
Yes, so I would say there are many situations where a respiratory therapy is needed, and there are various types of therapies. We're focusing on airway clearance therapy, which means basically clearing the lungs from excess amounts of secretions. So patients with chronic lung conditions, like you mentioned, COPD, bronchiectasis, cystic fibrosis, all have damage being done to their airways, and their mechanism of clearing secretion is just not functioning as it should with a healthy lung. Their airways are dilated and damaged and just full of thick secretions, which cannot be expelled in simple ways. And having that mucus retention is a source for repeated cycles of clinical exacerbations where they have flare-ups, their condition worsens, they have infections. Further damage is caused to the airway, and this kind of is called like the vicious cycle of worsening of their condition. So these patients unfortunately suffer from a pretty poor quality of life because of their chronic illness, just difficulty breathing, coughing up, uh, trouble participating in basic daily activities. Sleeping is compromised. So symptoms are very burdensome, and a lot of that is related to these retained secretions. So airway clearance is kind of one of the is the key, keeping their lungs clear and preventing from these repeated episodes of deterioration. Um, and mentioning respiratory therapy. So this is something that needs to be done every single day. These are chronic conditions. There's no cure, and basically they did to keep the condition under control and prevent these exacerbations, prevent the deterioration. So airway clearance is a key, and this is not something that can be done like in the case that he told about this patient. Access to an experienced respiratory therapist coming into the patient's house, treating them every single day, that's not scalable. There are not enough therapists out there. Even if there were, not enough highly skilled personnel, and let alone funding for this within our health systems. So the key is to deliver highly effective therapy in the home setting for independent daily use, and that's what this is all about.
Yeah. And what does the device actually do? So talk to me about the setup of the technology.
Yeah, sure. So the device has several components to it. It's a wearable vest that applies pressure on the chest, and it works with a guidance app that provides patients with breathing instruction. So the pressure applied on the chest changes to engage the patients with breathing techniques. While the app supports that kind of coaching, so you can imagine this as the digital therapist there through the system, with the best kind of mimicking what a therapist would do with their hands and guiding the patients through different breathing phases, where the technique is inspired by a well-known established airway clearance technique called autogenic drainage, where the problem is that patients often struggle to learn and implement these kind of airway clearance modalities on their own. So it requires this extensive training and coaching and technique, which even though the technique is known and established as an effective one, at the end of the day, patients are not able to do it independently in an accurate way, and it requires this specialized assistance. And with LibAirty, we managed to kind of eliminate that need for external support and training, as the device is designed to walk the patient through the benefits of these techniques and these breathing maneuvers, where the compressions are synchronized with the external guidance, and it works together. And we have been hearing so far very good feedback from our users, as well as results from our clinical trial, and the ability to really automate this kind of therapy for thorough lung clearance.
And without respiratory therapy, what's actually happening to patients? Like, is it purely their condition gets worse, or is their mortality increase if that you aren't getting the access to the respiratory therapy?
Yeah, so there are various modalities for airway clearance out there. Some of them, and it varies within different regions, whether you're looking at the US, UK, or other locations in Europe. Um, basically, patients are treated also with some medications and some nebulizers or hypertonic saline to help with the clearing secretions. Other devices out there using offsetting forces to mobilize secretions from the airways, and the entire consideration around airway clearance is really to get to a technique that the patient will stick to and do it every single day. Because adherence is a challenge with this patient population. So the solution needs to be, on one hand, obviously effective, so patients would get a benefit from sticking to their care plan, but also something that patients can easily do, comfortably do on their own every single day and really integrate in their routine. Um, so the key is really to find a solution that the patient can keep on for basically the rest of their lives.
Okay, understood. So when did you and your co-founders understand that this was really a problem that needed to be fixed? What was the point where you decided, yeah, we need to build a company around this problem?
Yeah, so I would say COVID was a great spark for innovation, I would say, in various fields. So respiratory therapy, maybe more than all. So that was kind of the time that we started, the discussions about the significant shortage of staff within the respiratory therapist community. That's something I would say goes, that's a worldwide issue. It's not something local here to Israel. I maybe didn't mention my co-founders, apart from Gil Sokol, Dr. Moshe Ashkenazi, and Professor Ori Efrati, were all here based in Israel. They are from the National CF Center. So our initial thought was, again, the CF community at the time of COVID, and actually looking into what's happening in other areas. We understood that the need is much greater from this patient population, and actually conditions like COPD or bronchiectasis. There are millions of patients out there. Some of them today even underdiagnosed and undertreated, and we need to scale this kind of solution. So that's what kind of got us, to start and see how we can expand on very effective techniques that can be done, manually, but obviously we need to shift to home care. And I think COVID in many aspects of healthcare was really a driver for translating, hospital-based care or clinically supported techniques into the home setting.
Okay. So when you were pulling the company together, how did you first start to think about how you might tackle this solution? What was the kind of key things you were doing with the co-founders?
Yeah, so the company started as an incubator program, as an incubator project here at the MEDX Xelerator. Now it's called the Edge Venture Studios. So it's a medical device incubator supported by the Israeli Innovation Authority. So in collaboration with the co-founders, the Shido Medical Center, and the support by the medics team and the IAA, we really started by understanding the technique, understanding the therapy. So again, we were a small team back then. We were just like sitting during therapy sessions with patients, with the therapist, and just looking at what they're doing, what it is that they're um, telling the patients to do. How are they treating them? How is, from the very, even the smallest thing, is the patient sitting upright? Do they need to lie down? What changes if it's an elderly patient going into the room versus a younger CF patient? How do they accommodate and adapt the treatment for that? For these different users. So initially, I would say just, I think like every problem like someone is trying to solve, right? Just sit and learn. Sit, see what's happening, ask questions, many questions. So we started by, the basics of the therapy. But then with any other medical device, you need to kind of expand beyond the clinical utility and the technology to really understand also, the market environment. What is possible for home care? What would be the regulations? What kind of testing do we need to go through? How does the clinical validation landscape look like in terms of, okay, we need to design a clinical study. Let's make sure that this technology really works, right? What do we want to test? So obviously, as a starting point, this is an airway clearance solution. We wanted to see, does it clear secretions? How do you test that? just reading through, publications, literature in this space, understanding what would be the right design for a clinical trial. And that's kind of what we went and did in our first year, within, getting obviously through the prototypes developed. And we had a lot of iterations on the design of both the best component of the system and obviously the app as well. So yeah, and I cannot count the number of vest prototypes that we have here lying around. But we wanted to ensure, the right fit for various body sizes to make sure that the pressure is applied in a way that is comfortable enough, but really can mimic what a respiratory therapist can do with their hands. Um, how will we adjust it for patients? Because we have several sizes, but obviously people are different. So even, the ergonomic design of the straps and all of these small considerations, uh, uh, understanding that patients will be using this independently at home. So together with patients, we developed a device, getting their routine feedback throughout the development process. And I think this was kind of a very successful part to integrate, engineers on one hand, but obviously know what it takes to build and develop a product and get it through clinical validation and regulatory clearance. Clinicians on the other side who understand the condition, the physiology, and all of the different considerations for the therapy, and also the patients who can provide their perspective because these are our users at the end of the day. So kind of closing the loop very, very quickly throughout the development process kind of led us to what the device is today.
What in the development process was the most surprising thing that kind of challenged your assumptions when you set out? So, what what did you maybe believe at the start of this that when it got into the hands of the users and into testing, what was the thing that most surprised you about this?
I think I'm not sure if I can say this is kind of what surprised me, but the level of details that we had to iterate and think on was actually the app. And how do we translate breathing guidance and breathing instructions, something that can be simplified and in a way that kind of one size fits all, so every patient can understand. So I would say one of the first observations, just at the early days, sitting at the clinic and watching, was what do the respiratory therapists teach the patients as to how to breathe, and how do they correct them? And how can we do that in a way that it can, still work without the therapist in the room? So we spend a lot of time on iterating on the app, and that goes to, the right wording. What's the image on the screen? What is the tone of the audio of the recorded instructions? And we iterated on that, I think, for, I would say several months for sure. And with that process as well, we had patients involved and kind of get giving them these set of instructions and seeing what they do and validating that they can, do what we plan. Also, there's kind of, languages considerations. We're here in Israel. We wanted to make sure that everything is also proper in English and nothing kind of blocked in translation. So I think that was a very significant part of the product development that maybe initially we didn't anticipate being so crucial. And today I would say this is something we're getting really, really good feedback on from our users, like how simple it is to follow these instructions, to operate the app. And they made on this front, like hard work really, really paid off to make sure we're getting that right. Because as I said, we cannot have a therapist with every patient at the room every single day. That's just not going to happen.
Awesome. So, wanted to go back to kind of that founding part of it, and obviously, MEDX is an accelerator type organization. So, talk to me about this support and infrastructure that MEDX gave in the early stages, and kind of how important it was to be a part of that MEDX ecosystem.
Yeah, sure. I would say it was and still is. Maybe the most misleading thing about this, it's called MEDX Xelerator, where usually accelerators are short periods of time for just accelerating a device, but it's actually an incubator. So with an incubator, it's a much longer process. And I would say it was very beneficial for the company to be part of this program for various reasons. One obviously is funding through the incubator program with the IAA. the IA, the Israeli Innovation Authority. We got our initial funding for the company, so that got us through the first 2 years under this very well-structured program to get through like first meaningful milestones. And that was when we did the product development and the clinical validation. And being part of an incubator, first of all, we had access to many of the resources that as a standalone startup, you might not be able to access. On the infrastructure side, on the consulting side, having a very large network of the right people to work with, and being part of an incubator really helped with this kind of access. Also in terms of, cost considerations, and you can imagine if you have 3 different companies who need support by the same a service provider or consultant, this can be very cost effective as well. And the guidance of the managing partners of the MEDX team. Again, at the time MEDX, today they're Edge, and they're still supporting the company up until today. After graduating from the incubator period, they actually went on and founded a venture capital fund for medtech startups in this kind of clinical early commercial phase. So the same team had followed and continued to support us within a follow-on investment, and I think this is a great advantage to have someone that really knows the company from day one and can really support it as it grows. Um, and also, as on a personal level, just being within an incubator with surrounded by other medtech startups, even if they're operating in I would say completely different fields, often they deal with similar problems, or just brainstorming in the coffee station can spark some ideas, and that's very I would say that's very fruitful in a way in terms of like being in this environment. So this is something I definitely recommend.
I want to take a minute to say thank you to our sponsors, TTP. TTP is a leader in complex medical device development. With deep scientific and engineering expertise, they help medtech teams crack tough development challenges and make the right calls early, reducing rework, delays, and uncertainty later on. Whether you're navigating uncharted technical territory or racing towards market, TTP brings clarity and real-world judgment to the decisions that shape performance, usability, and manufacturability. By retiring risk early and grounding innovation in real-world constraints, they help you move forward with speed and confidence. To find out more, check out the show notes. So talking about that is like MEDX and Edge kind of operate as a bridge between Israel and the US and help that early stage innovation that Israel is so exceptional at, and kind of learning how to bridge that gap and make it a commercial reality in the US. So you guys are very much at the early stages of commercialization right now and starting that journey. So talk me through how that early stage commercial has gone since getting the FDA clearance last year.
Yeah. So definitely a very exciting time. Very different phase for the company, and it relates to everything, right? One thing is the people that were needed to be hired now when the organization is trying to starting to be commercial and having a team overseas. So yeah, we launched the product late 2025 after receiving the FDA clearance for it. And continuing on the model supported by Edge, we also received an investment from the New Jersey Economic Development Authority. So we have established our headquarters in New Jersey, and we're supported also by that program that funded our additional funding round. So with that, we have established our team there. We're growing now with more and more people joining in and supporting our scale. So yeah, I would say initial feedback from the field is very encouraging, and I would say it's really exciting to see the device that. And again, we started the company less than 6 years ago, and reaching a phase where real users, real patients have it at home, use it, say that it helps them. We had a wife of a patient call to ask us some troubleshooting with the device, and she kept on mentioning how her husband is better since he's using it, and how thankful she is for it. And hearing this kind of feedback is something we all, I would say, aim for, work for, and kind of keeps us motivated, because obviously medtech is hard for so many reasons. And going through all the different steps and different considerations. But this is it's just a great reminder that at the end of the day, we're doing something that patients really, really benefit from and appreciate. And last month, I was in the U.S. at a patient conference actually, and I had a chance to interact and just speak with some of these patients and hear from them what are their challenges, what are their needs, and and they got to try it on, and the feedback, like the immediate feedback of patients just sitting there trying it and starting to cough up secretions. We had to go and get the napkins or like small cups. Sorry for the graphics, but we had to get some napkins for them to be able to clear it out so they can continue with the therapy. And they're just saying like how it feels so different from everything they've tried before, and they're happy about having this and just taking a brochure and saying they'll ask their doctor about it and say this was very rewarding, just to validate that we did something that really has an impact. And obviously we're still early in the commercial phase, so we're growing, the team is growing, and we're kind of expanding throughout the US now as we scale, hoping to get more exposure, more of these kind of interactions with the patients and also with the clinicians who are, very interested to see innovative technology in this space where traditional therapies have been a while for over decades now. And suddenly something a bit, let's say, with a different mode of action and superior clinical efficacy and being available for their patients to try and to use. And again, clinical trial results have been very encouraging, where we showed double the efficacy in sputum clearance compared to traditional therapies. So that, combined with improved user preference, can be a strong driver for long-term adherence, which needless to say how important it is for patients to just do this every single day.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned how hard it is to build a medtech company. It's incredibly hard. There's challenges along the way, lots that can be foreseen, and then lots that really just spring out of nowhere. So on that journey, like you've taken this all the way from founding, sitting with a team and trying to understand the problem, all the way through now to the kind of commercial launch. So how have you had to reinvent yourself or reinvent the team, or how have you had to adapt yourself as you move through these phases of the company to where you are now, which not every founder who's there on day one is necessarily the person to take it all the way through to commercial. So how does it feel, and how have you managed to kind of reinvent yourself along that way?
Yeah, I would say that's a great question. I must admit, I'm still, I guess, reinventing myself or growing with the company on a personal level. So yeah, when we started the company, maybe I this is time to kind of to elaborate on my previous experience. My background is biomedical engineering, so most of my career I've been in the wearable devices, medical devices. Um, Going through this process again, prototypes, clinical trials, regulatory clearance. So I've been with a company called Sensible Medical for around 8 years before taking on my position at Synchrony. We're really focused on the R&D side, as initially as an engineer and then as a project manager. So I had, I would say, back experience on the R&D side. And at the time, I went through studied for an MBA, had some time spent at the Wharton Business School under an exchange program where I got kind of exposure to the healthcare management track. And after that experience, that's where, personally I said, okay, I want to start something from the very beginning, very early days, and bring in, my previous experience to action. And this is how I teamed up with the MEDX founding team and with our co-founders, bringing in that kind of hands-on wearable medtech experience. Again, I didn't have, I would say, intention necessarily to co-found a startup, but sometimes the opportunities just show up and they feel right, and kind of just need to dive into that. And thankfully to the support of the incubator team, and they're I would say giving me this opportunity to lead the company, and the co-founders to work with me on these very early days. This is something that kind of has evolved, I would say, very, very effectively. And as the company grew and we were tackling, different challenges, then we brought in, the right people for the right phase. Um, we were very, very lean for quite a long time. So working with subcontractors, working with consultants, and I guess the struggle was mainly like choosing who to work with, making sure that we can really get the added value that we need, and we can really define what it is that we're targeting. With time, I guess, I kind of also improved on that front, kind of trusting more my intuition or some of the thoughts, and understanding that, as a CEO or as a co-founder, at the end of the day, you're the one who most likely knows best what the real problems are, what the real needs are, and just surrounding myself with kind of a network of people who I can consult with, on various aspects. I think that has been extremely helpful, whether here within the incubator or whether just, externally with my network. So yeah, I think that's important for, in general for career development, right? Regardless of what it is that you're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned that you weren't actually looking necessarily to co-found a company, but the opportunity came along and it felt right. So how did you know it felt right? And when did you decide, you know what, I'm going to go on this journey? Like what was the moment where you were, yeah, let's jump into this?
Yeah, okay. I guess, well, I'm not sure if I ever told anyone about this, but, let's do it on camera. Um, yeah, well, I came for this kind of just introduction meeting with a team because I wanted to join something, from the early days. And then the suggestion to lead the project, and at the time, I called it a project, right? It wasn't even a company. It was a prototype that we need to kind of see what we can do with it, came along. And, honestly, I felt overwhelmed because before that, my experience was, just project management, but, very focused, not of a CEO, not, dealing with maybe business considerations. Um, so I thought maybe, this can be too much. At the time, I was also relatively, 6 years younger than what I am today. I just had my first daughter, so I was also on maternity leave. So that was a consideration. Like, do I really want to start a new job and a completely different type of job, or something that is very, I would say, lonely? Because as a co-founder of a startup, you're pretty lonely for quite some time. And dealing with, motherhood for the first time, which is something we can talk about for, completely different episode.
Yeah.
But I think what kind of got me to say this is what I want to do is just I was thinking, like, there's no other thing that can compare to this. I mean, the technology, and again, I've been dealing with vests for elderly home care, medical use for most of my career, so that was kind of spot on. But that's I would say that's the basic point, because I knew, there's added value I can bring there. I met with a team, and I understood the need. And again, it was COVID, thinking about helping respiratory patients. I mean, what can motivate you more than that? And meeting the co-founders and seeing how passionate they are about the solution, and their vision for the technology, really got me kind of engaged. And again, being part of an incubator was also a consideration. So, having the right support around me as a first time, founder, that's kind of where I said, okay, let's just jump in and try, and let's see what happens. Uh, if you would have asked me back then, um, how things will look like down the road, I guess I was less confident than I am today of, how where we are. And that's also something that was kind of built over time.
Yeah. Well, that's an incredible story. Were there any points along this journey where you thought about, you know what, this maybe wasn't the right decision. Maybe I want to give this up. This is way harder than I thought it was going to be. Have there been points like that along this?
Yeah, I would lie if I say there weren't, right? I think every entrepreneur struggles with, daily challenges, and in their occasions when, whether it's when you're fundraising and you hear no after no after no for, various reasons, it can get you really, it can get to you, right? Am I doing something wrong? Is it not interesting enough? Will someone else do it better, or am I missing anything? So, that obviously happens, and some challenges also show up when you don't anticipate them, right? You have, employees that you like. quitting for their own reasons, or and feeling like you need to start over. So there are times where it can get tough. But I would say, like I from very early on, I knew that Liberty, that's a product. I knew that we have something that really can make a difference. So being like so into that and just keep pushing through. Like, I want this out there. I want to bring it to market. I know how meaningful this can be for patients. And that just it with that, just overcoming all of these times that are, obviously less fun in the founder journey. And here again, yeah, we're in Israel. We had, or we're still having, wars on and off depending on the volume. So that's obviously not making life easier for anyone. But that's also part of the motivation, right? We cannot give up on this. We cannot let this just stay here. Um, and yeah.
And what's that like building in that kind of conflict at the moment? What's it like being a founder in Israel who's trying to launch internationally and doing incredible things for patients? Like, how does it hold you back at all? Like, what actually is it like on the inside?
Yeah, well, I would say when we can look at this from different angles, but we have and we are still building a US team. So our team in the US is extremely experienced, extremely dedicated. We have a great leadership and salespeople there to, get the word out and support our customers. So, one of the things prioritizing where we're building the organization is that we're heavily investing now in the US team and infrastructure, again being the commercial engine of the company. So that's, one way to overcome that. And I would say 2.5 years now through the war, I guess we're just used to it. I mean, even yesterday we had a sudden day of some escalation and missile attacks, and girls were home, no schools again, and everyone was semi-lockdown. But today we're back at the office. So we just managed to do what we can, and it forces you, I guess, to be just creative and extremely resilient. Regardless, working in Israel with the US has its own, time zone challenges and consideration.
Sure.
But again, that's also, an advantage as a young mother. I can, spend the afternoon sometimes with my kids, get them to sleep, and then start, another working day for where it's the early afternoon in the US and can stay on early to the night. So I guess we just are very flexible and working according to the situation.
Absolutely. And resilience is the key with this.
Yep.
And I think it's a skill set that has been obviously, yeah, forced upon you more than more than most. So, if everything goes well in this journey with Synchrony, what does this look like in 5 years' time? We're obviously commercializing at the minute, but what's the 5-year vision? Where does this company really go to?
Yeah. Well, we see a huge opportunity with even a current product now, because the bronchiectasis population is heavily underdiagnosed, and this market is growing because awareness is changing. In the U.S., more and more centers are being opening up and accredited as part of a care center network for bronchiectasis. So this is really driving more and more awareness for bronchiectasis as a condition and for airway clearance as part of the care path. So we see LibAirty taking, a big portion of this growing market with our superior solution entering the space. So, that's kind of our target focus where we are now. But expanding a bit on that, the core technology and the core principles behind how our device works can be implemented into various other indications and use cases. And this is also one of the things that we have now under our pipeline to expand this offering and to create an additional, I would say, additional product lines for this technology. So I think there's, so much that can be done with a ship to home care, with digital care taking place, and obviously, AI coming into play for personalized solutions. And this is where we're kind of taking our technology to the next level. Have a truly, I would say, home care companion for disease management for these patients for various considerations of their condition, not only a regular. So again, there's a huge gap, huge underserved population. And yeah, I think it will be very excited, but let's let's reconnect in 2030 and see where things are.
Absolutely. And what are the kind of risks that still need to be overcome for the business at this stage? Like what are the hurdles and roadblocks that could get in the way of us having that chat in 2030?
Yeah. Well, obviously execution is something that, as I said, transitioning to a different phase. It's a different organization, it's different skill set, different people that we're hiring. So now we're really heavily focused on the execution and getting that first experience right, because it matters most. I would say so. That's where we are really dedicated now to just make sure that, as mentioned, patients are getting the experience that we want them to, that our channel partners are happy with our support and the way we operate, and everything really kind of falling into place.
Good. So, if you were to go back in time and give yourself some advice when you were founding the company, what would be the piece of advice you'd give to yourself at that point?
Um, I guess I would tell myself to trust my instinct more and earlier. It took some time to gain this kind of confidence. I had a lot of questions, a lot of things maybe didn't add up. And maybe this is kind of my nature as an engineer by background, kind of just digging into that and understanding things and not getting an answer that doesn't really fit until I understand what's going on. I think, with time, I had more and more experience that, okay, right, I was right to insist on this. I was right to ask for this clarification because it resulted in, additional feature for the product. So maybe that would have made me a bit more reassured at the early phase.
Okay.
And yeah, just asking questions, it's fine. Challenge the answer that you receive and just keep with that.
Yeah. And what's the legacy that you want to leave for this company? So, yeah, what would success look like, and what's the legacy if you've succeeded in this mission?
Yeah, well, I think it all comes back to the patients and to the experience that they have, and having a device out there that we can see patients are happy with, that they're using. And again, adherence is such a challenge. Just, leaving a device out there that provides patients with options that really help them just live their life. That's, I'm happy with that. I mean, that's kind of what really motivated us from the start. And thankfully we're, starting to see that, happen in real world. And we want to see more of that.
Okay. Cool. Well, from my side, I've had a really good conversation today, so thank you very much for joining me, Anat. Is there anything you want to leave the audience with, closing comments about Synchrony at all, and what do you want them to know about this company right now?
Yeah. Well, first, happy to answer any questions, or feel free anyone to reach out with some thoughts on the topics that we have discussed. I will mention that, as I said before, our team is growing. We have some open positions, mainly in the U.S., also soon in Israel. So happy to kind of expand on those opportunities as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Henry. It was great to speak with you.
Thank you so much for joining me on the Crux of MedTech podcast. If you're not already doing so, please go ahead and subscribe on YouTube or follow the podcast on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. This podcast is proudly brought to you by Crux. Crux is a medtech search firm which places pioneers in transformative roles to help us live longer, healthier lives. We do three things for companies. We help hire world-class executive talent. We help companies raise investment from Series A to Series C and execute upon M&A. And we also are building a community of medtech leaders to facilitate peer-to-peer learning and accelerate the companies to help them go faster. If you're interested in any of those three things, please reach out to me on LinkedIn or follow the link in the show notes to find out more. Thank you.